Jill's going to start to see the results of the karakia.
E tū motu karakia. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa pōnamu te moana, kei huarahi mā tātou i te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou i tātou katoa, hui e, tai ki e.
Koe hi te manu, takiri mai i te ata, kau, ka awatea, ti hei Moriora. E te whenua e takoto nei, tēnā koe. E te maunga, e matika nei, tēnā koe. E te mawana, ko atu, tēnā koe. Manakitia mai tēne taio kōpipi. Look after our land, look after living things. Fragile living things, vulnerable living things. Ki te whare e tūmai nei, tūmai rā, hei whakaruru hau ia tātou, tēnā koe. E te kai karakia, tēnā koe. E ngā manuhiri me ngā hauai whā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Tēnā tātou katoa ku hui mai nei i tēnei maru, i te wā o Matariki. I tēnei pechakucha, te kaupapa i nāia nei. Nau mai haere mai, i te whānau pechakucha. Nō reira, ki ngā kai kōrero, tēnei whakatauki, e koe, te tui, e kete, te kaka, e kuku, te kereru. E hara ahau i te tangata mōhio ki te kōrero o tira, o ti enga rea, enga waka, enga iwi, tēnā tātou katoa.
Welcome to Pechakucha 2021. So, yesterday I watched the triathlon with my 3 grandsons, and we were introduced to Hayden Wild. What a wonderful and talented human being. And we could all imagine what it was like at the Whakatane Fishing Club. It would have been wild, yeah. The same grandson's uncle, actually their father's cousin, is Tim Mickelson in the sevens, in the rugby sevens. So every time Tim gets the ball, it's pretty loud at our place here. Settles go crazy. So the Olympics are a time when we identify as being from Aotearoa, New Zealand, Pacific Nation. Might add that in. And so other factors to our identity after being Kiwis are our family, our ethnicity, our gender, sadly probably our age, and along with other things, our occupations. So Garden Design Society was established over 20 years ago to help garden designers to celebrate the skills and abilities around designing gardens. So anyone can belong to Garden Design Society of New Zealand, and so welcome, there's quite a few new faces tonight, and we welcome every one of you. And if you do want to join and get all our emails, you can go on the Garden Design Society of New Zealand website, and actually within the next day or two you'll even be able to pay your fee online because we've just gone on to zero. Yeah. So anyone can join, but then in recognition of members who are also involved professionally as garden designers, we offer the accreditation process. So a portfolio of work is examined by a panel of 3. And one of them is a garden design academic, one's a design professional, practitioner, and one is an artist designer from another discipline. And so that panel meet the applicant in a 1-hour interview. So 8 years ago, the accredited people thought, oh, we'll just get together and talk about what we do and show each other our work. And we thought, oh, maybe we could invite, the rest of the society to come too. And that's how this happened, the pechakucha sort of thing. So totally accidentally, it's almost become a punishment for getting accredited that you have to make a public appearance and talk to the group about your work. So Rudy and Naomi were the successful applicants in 2020, and they get to go first so they can enjoy the rest of the evening. And both of them thought that it was compulsory that they did it. But if you're thinking about accreditation, don't be scared off about this presentation because, it's actually not totally compulsory. It sort of is. Yeah. However, as we first envisaged, it's certainly a really lovely means to introduce yourself via your work. Yeah, the variety of styles and skills just emphasise that this is an artistic endeavour and we can be inspired by each other and we can be collegial, but we're always all going to put out work that's got our own stamp on it. So, adding to the richness of what tonight has become, Second Nature came along and said, oh, we'll sponsor this event, we'll pay for all the food and the glug. So we immediately doubled the amount of glug, because they were paying for it. Yeah. And then that's really good for our coffers because we are really careful with our money from Garden Design Society, and we're really looking forward to bringing a very good overseas person over. We use the money for other things. So thank you so much, Second Nature. And thank you to you, Deb, who are watching from your bed of sickness. You're the one who puts all the advertising together. Thank you, Anna Maria, and our team that we all enjoy putting on this event. So, Rudy, where are you? It's funny that, we've watched you from long ago and you've seen us not in our party clothes, There's other, you have to be about making things happen, don't you? Yeah. So before you do your presentation, we've got something for you. So could you come up, please? You wouldn't hear the thing, but just before he's allowed to talk, here's the certificate. And Rudy, you're on. Would you can either use this one or this one, whichever you're not comfortable.
Let's see. Let's hope they've got me. I don't see anything coming up. Good evening, everyone. Introduce myself first and foremost, I guess. Rudolf Iseli is my name. Everyone knows me as Rudy. Best way to introduce myself, I think I will go back and just tell you that I was born under the mountains of the Waitakere Ranges. I'm actually a first-generation Kiwi, born from Swiss father and a South African mother. So just to give you a little bit of a background, myself, I have studied landscape architecture and moved on to start my own business with a bit of a design philosophy following salutogenic landscapes. Firstly, I wanted to acknowledge my experience. Goes back, I've worked with Chris, Second Nature, very long time ago, Barbara Garrett, hands-on doing planting, plant design. My design career then moved on into, as a graduate landscape architect, working with Robin Schaefer, and this is one of my last larger projects that I worked on with her in a country landscape way, just to give you a bit of perspective on the vast kind of projects that I have worked on that have built my experience and me as a professional garden designer. this one, one of our, sorry, this is a very first for me, so I'm stumbling a bit, I'm just going with the flow. Specialty, which I've evolved to enjoy, is swimming pool design, and obviously all the intricacies around council regulations for that. And that one particular had a ha-ha wrapping around half so that you open up the views out through to the wider landscape. As I departed Schaefer Design and started up my own company with the philosophy of trying to get a bit more of a mix of hands-on as well as design work, I had the opportunities to collaborate with Schaefer Design as well, where I was then brought in after Schaefer had done some design for clients that then didn't really, they were more invested in the practicalities of getting the landscapes made. So I was brought in at this stage, given the plans to then look at how we're going to actually create this through project management and a little bit of refinement of design, but trusted to keep the essence of Schaefer Design's intentions at the forefront as such. And this was one of my strengths I feel I've developed that I talked about in my accreditation process, that I have developed quite a few would say relationships with other designers or other landscapers where I come in and work alongside them with that design intention, and often, so instead of, in this circumstance, the design details have evolved more on the hands-on, as well as the planting design, which you can see in the pictures through detailed hardwood screens, Te limestone walls with a water spout and crazy paving and what have you. Likewise, the planting design was more of a, how do we say, collaboration also with the owners. So they kind of had that buy-in on things that they liked, and we worked the process together. Moving into, I think, get into my next is kind of exploration into more of my own design work, where I have had the opportunity to do swimming pool design, and I've explored my mix of media of using SketchUp, 3D modelling and Photoshop kind of overlays and things like that. Just to give you a bit of an idea from a design sense, this project is currently in construction, and kind of the raw essentials have kind of started to make their way in planting as well as. So my business as such, I work as a designer predominantly. I project manage as well as do the planting in the flesh as a soft landscaper. Likewise, another project where coming in, I like to always show those before pictures where we all come in as designers and are expected to kind of read the client's mind and come up with some kind of brand scheme that, using modelling and different ways. This one looking to have quite a modern Californian feel about it. Funnily enough, to say the client, he's a car salesman, and to him this is just a water feature. As such, he kind of refers to it as, I don't think anyone's going to swim in it actually, but it's going to look nice. But I think his kids will say otherwise. So this one also is currently in construction, and all the gravelled areas will be astroturfed by the end of the week, I think actually. which has been quite a good process. These are some of my work which is currently ongoing, and I'm exploring the use of between using 3D modelling, but trying to also, with the iPad, loosely sketching ideas, giving clients quite an immediate way of looking at being able to conceptualize the ideas. And I think what I wanted to come back to here with the cellulogenic landscape approach that has kind of become a philosophy which I've developed through this accreditation process, which it kind of made me reflect on what is it that I really hold dear to my design style and my philosophy. And this is still a work in progress, obviously, but like what's been shown here, movement of plants, water, all these things have a really beneficial impact on a user's health and well-being. And see how fast the time flies. But that gives you a brief overview.
I'm glad you're still doing the soft landscaping, Rudy, because I like to think that we kind of were modelled it, because he has seen us in the mud a bit, yeah. Actually putting things in, someone has to do it. Yeah, so our next person is Naomi. Naomi, where are you? Thank you so much for knowing you had to do it. And embarrassingly, we spelt your name wrong on your accreditation, so it's beautifully new printed with your correct spelling. So congratulations. And okay. Right. I just start. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko mātātou te waka, ko Ngāti Awa te iwi, ko Hokopu te hapu, ko te whare o Taroa, te marae, ko Naomi Gray, toku ingoa. I grew up in Torbay and now live there with my husband Stu and 2 boys. I did a diploma in visual communications and worked as a graphic designer creating packaging, print and branding material for over 10 years. I became fed up with the corporate world and wanted to do something that brought joy and made a positive difference in people's lives. Oh, we've missed a slide. Okay, I took time out to travel, visiting friends and many gardens in England, France and Japan. I came home, studied landscape design at Unitec and worked for multiple Ellerslie Flower Show gold medal winner Trina Tully. That's that slide. Something's happened to my slides. So that's England, France, Japan. My plans are created to be vibrant and user-friendly for clients. I have designed a wide range of gardens from small courtyards to lifestyle blocks. My design aesthetic has developed from my childhood spent in gardens, earlier career as a graphic designer, and my love of the arts, sculpture, architecture, and the natural world around me. For me, it is important to reflect clients' personalities and create a bespoke garden originating from their wish list, but delivering more than they could have imagined. This mid-century house reminded me of my papa, who designed and built a family home in the 1950s, influenced by the group architect style. A strong childhood memory is of the large, amorphic, interconnecting shapes in yellow, green, pink and brown my papa painted on the floor and back walls of the double carport space under the house using leftover paint, fairly avant-garde for the time. Using that memory, I designed a playful interaction between a new fish pond and path, a series of amorphic concrete pads dissecting the rectangular shape and giving an easy flow to the front door. We retained some existing plants and added hardy but more New Zealand vibe. Creating great flow and proportion and delivering interesting, functional and practical spaces are a high priority, and I've
There you go. In this project, I redesigned the front yard, solving a need for stairs and multiple entries and the wish to maximise the private usable space available. We used a palette of contrasting hard materials, creating interest combined with a pared back planting palette. Now for a bit of space to breathe. Yes, stonework and rendered block walls and the timber. And just working with some existing walls which needed to be redone. And yeah, some very personal clients' ideas. I spend time understanding my clients' sense of place and personality, how people live alongside their whānau, neighbours and wider community, appreciating context, conditions and aspect. This is an ongoing project on a large property in Waitoki. A central feature is are the two ponds and a large arc of bush which shelters the site. We have started with the pond planting and orchards and are working our way to link the bush areas and revegetate the watercourses. We're going up the hillside right around the back. I think we've got a pool area to do as well, so it's quite a big project. I love to use sculptural elements and play with different textures. This is a small courtyard garden with corten steel planters and concrete steppers, and the clients wanted a lush jungle-like feel to be enclosed. This open macrocarpa fence has been allowed to weather off and has gained a lovely patina. I aim to bring biodiversity into the landscape, always searching for something different to add to the plant palette, to broaden the range of plants I use. I am particularly interested in creating bird-friendly gardens and aiming for low water use. For the Ellerslie Flower Show Gardens on Plinths, I designed Tri-Nations for the Birds, a showcase of New Zealand, Australian and South African bird-attracting plants. I worked with Claire and the team at Sculpt Gardens to make these happen, designing the angular corten steel planters and having them fabricated. That was the best picture of the pot, so sorry, you get to see me as well. I was also the garden to tables garden specialist at my children's primary school. This has been a rewarding opportunity to inspire the tamariki with active learning about many things from soil health to growing vegetables, composting, seed saving, water conservation, nutrient-dense food, and the list continues. I have contributed ideas for the overall school plan, including a food forest, bush area, pā harakiki, natural playground, and designing a new mahinga kai. We are working with different groups to get this project underway, including the whānau Māori on the Rongo and the Waharoa. I'll just finish. When my tamariki were at Play Centre, I helped to organise a Waharoa from Carver Reuben Kirkwood. Kia ora.
It's pretty hard to comment. You don't really need to, do you? Yeah. Now, I think it was 3 years ago when Natasha got accredited and had to do her speech, compulsory pechakucha. Where are you, Natasha? You cleverly introduced us to your grandmother. And I particularly remember the fabulous colours of her sari and, you telling us something about her, and you used some of your slides. And so once we got onto your work, we were not surprised to see, these elements coming through. So thank you so much for coming back and doing it again. It can't have been so bad. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Natasha, as Glenys introduced me. Bear with me, because today I'm off on a tangent. I would like to take you to my favorite season and to my favorite city, the city of Mumbai. And I want to take you to one particular day. It's the day that the monsoon arrives, the monsoon that we wait for such a long time, through the really long, hot summer. And it's the fervor of like just waiting for it to come. And it often coincides with the first day of school, or at least the week that the school opens. And it's unmissable. Maybe I might walk around. Does this work? No. Surely it's been 20 seconds. So it's, the clouds, like you can't miss a monsoon cloud. Like you see it coming from a real distance, and the anticipation of waiting for the monsoon starts a week before it actually happens, because we get to know that the monsoon has arrived in Kerala, and it's further south from where I live in Mumbai, and it takes a week for it to come to Mumbai. And that whole week is just like, oh, it's gonna rain, it's gonna rain. Yep, we're gonna rain in 1 week, and like everyone's like, and the anticipation builds, and then it arrives, and it's just so beautiful. It's like a big filter across the entire city, and it just like a big blanket that, and then it pours, and then you can see it starts flooding in lots of places. But it's a really exciting time. These photos are taken more recently by one of my friends, and this is around the COVID lockdown, so there's not many people, so this is not your average monsoon day. But this is us in the 90s. So when it would rain, and this is really common to do, we'd all just go out. You don't stay indoors when it rains, you go out, and you get wet, you get soaked. And as you see, we're wearing raincoats, and sometimes we would travel like an hour to different places just to get into the rain, and we'd not be the only people. There'd be a lot of people out there rejoicing, and that's my sister. This photo really cracks me up. So here, this is the waterfront, and there's also something about the way the water lashes against the kind of whatever we've tried to do to keep it out, and even the mood of the water when the clouds arrive is just, it's amazing. I can't describe. Like I really, really miss this feeling of rain when you've waited for it through a hot summer. And I think my dad was, too lazy to lift the camera, so he asked my sister to bend down, and that's where she is. So this is, like, I would say about an hour-ish away from where we live. And we'd go and seek waterfalls. These wouldn't normally exist outside of the monsoon. So these are just kind of, all these waterfalls that would just open up when the water, and it's just the land and all the different things it does when it kind of meets water. And yeah, we'd just go bathe in them, and it's really, really fresh and nice. And well, that's monsoon for you. I'm gonna stop talking about how amazing and how much I miss monsoon. And then came 2005, 26th of July. The reason I'm talking to you about water and monsoon is because yesterday marked whatever years it is since 2005 of the worst floods I have ever experienced in my life. And it was the worst flood that Mumbai experienced at that point. We got, I think, the average of the entire season's rainfall in one day, which is 944 millimeters of rainfall. So it was not rain anymore, it was a flood. And this was like, I really like this image because it was like, what have we done kind of moment. And the city drowned, like it completely. It was absolute chaos. For 3 days, the city came to a complete standstill. There was no cell phone network, no electricity, no transport. My sister had just started going to university, or it was more like high school, not university. A little bit away from home. It was more than an hour's commute away. We didn't know where she was. My mum felt sick, as mothers are. She got really, really worried. And it was all really like heightenedly dramatic. Like there was like thunderstorms, and No one was able to get anywhere, and we were all stuck at home. But we still went out for a walk because we weren't sure. We didn't know how bad the situation was at that point. And we were like, oh, look, there's so much water. And we're waiting, and then halfway through, when we were wading through so much water, my grandmom was like, this is not a very good idea. I think we should go back home and, wait indoors. And yes, and it just kind of kept getting worse. But then, business as usual. People still needed to eat. But what went so wrong? Everything just went so wrong for my lovely city, my lovely overcrowded city. And now here we were stuck, and it was quite horrific, actually, what happened. And I will tell anyone who will listen to me to follow the work of Anuradha Mathur and Dilip Dakunha, who work with water. And they have the most interesting way of looking at water, and I think it really changed the way in which I looked at land and water and the way we design. So this is originally Mumbai. It is 7 islands, 7 very separate islands, and there's a lot of, so Mumbai is often referred to as the island city, but Anuradha Mathur and Dilip argue that it's not an island, it's an estuary. And it's about understanding the differences, the different ways in which water wants to interact with land. So from that photo that I showed you, up until now, it's completely been reclaimed. All of the mangroves have been destroyed to build, kind of reclaimed for more development, more houses, more building. And well, as you can see here, that there's, roads and buildings and more buildings, and we're constantly fighting against this water and trying to buy land or claim land that is not really ours to claim. And then the city grew, and it started fighting its estuarine origins and turned into something that I don't think works very well with the land. And every year we have a monsoon that is nothing like the monsoon I remember from my childhood, and is more and more about getting stuck and having no electricity and losing millions of dollars on the economy. The 2005 flood, apparently I didn't know this, but when I was looking it up for this talk, I realized that we lost about 150 million New Zealand dollars worth of economy, so it's pretty devastating for a lot of people. I mean, we survived fine. Okay, so the reason I've had this whole conversation with you about water and monsoon and all of that is because we, our profession, we work with land, we work with water, we work with plants. And we've got a real good opportunity here to make good decisions, to make good choices about the kind of work we want to do. And even today on a hot summer day, when it rains and I hear Aucklanders complain about the rain in summer, it takes me back to the monsoon of my childhood, to the most beautiful memory of monsoon. And I hope one day that I get to return to that, and that we can start embracing water for the magical thing that it is and the way it interacts with land. So yeah, that's me.
You'll be on again, Natasha. Yeah. Just start thinking of the next one. Yeah. Bill, where are you, Bill? You're up next. Some of us remember you doing gardens in the Ellerslie Flower Show days. Yeah. So Bill is an experienced and established designer, and he is so generous to the Garden Design Society. And thank you so much for participating tonight, Bill. Sorry I didn't have my cell phone.
That's all right. Thank you very much. I'm just going to barge straight on into it. What I thought I'd do tonight is talk about the construction of natural water features. It's a little bit practical, I'm afraid, but it just shows you how I use computer design to visualise for the client based on their brief, to present drawings which my contractors and constructors can work to, and the reasons why we do it. So this is a swimming pool with a water feature included. The idea in this case was the existing pond was to do the vanishing edge thing, and once again get away from the swimming pool fencing idea by making sure that one of the sides was 1.2 metres above with a weir so that you didn't have to have a fence. With the water feature going. Natural water features should really only be encouraged for clients if the site is calling for it. I think definitely the site is really you're really trying to make sure that you're doing something that's complementary within the wider context of the landscape. We were very, very pleased with this result. It's quite a lot more mature now. Once again, swimming pool fencing. I came into landscaping when Swimming Pool Fencing Act first came in, and it just completely threw us. So I designed a swimming pool around the landscape and not around the fence. You just have to make sure you design the fence afterwards to fit in with it. It's just the council rules. Water features can be built using liners. This is one job where we used a big liner and fabrics in a valley. This particular liner comes in a 7 metre wide roll, so it allowed me enough laterality to weave an arrangement of rock. So this is just after it was completed. The forest sort of at the back, all ready for the deciduous forest in this case, and lots of ground cover to reflect moss. This client wanted to have moss going through a valley. Well, this was the photograph he gave me. And so I said, well, I'm sorry, we can't quite do that. But up here, we've been able to use Muhlenbeckia and Protea to sort of reflect the moss, and in time, choosing enough exotics which have colour that will, emulate a sort of a Japanesey look, which is what he was after. So not totally within my sort of philosophy of landscape design, but if a client wants to have a Japanese-inspired garden, well, you just have to go ahead and do your best. In this case also, I've taken some examples. They wanted a little pavilion on the island that we've built. So, by just researching some different shapes of some little pieces, this is once again using the 3D technology and Vectorworks I use just to try and give them some choice on what to do, and they actually chose this little one here. Another job where I was in the side of a hill, which the client wanted to have a big waterfall and a pond. It did suit it because it was rural and there was a lot of native bush existing, so we did spend a lot of the people's money to do it, taking the existing deck that was already there, creating a little bit of a reflective pond before the waterfall goes down, and making sure that it sort of pulls in the wider, views in the distance. Once again, a lot of natural, native vegetation, just oi and so on, to reflect the sort of the native area. So once again, Vectorworks is quite useful, a little bit cartoony, but this enabled me to do a drawing to sell this concept to another client. Very difficult to build a waterfall on a piece of flat site, so you had to create a mound. We modelled a fence to try and emulate the distance, the landscape, the wider hillscape, to try and bring that in a little bit. And once again, my contractors really like to have a drawing like this to just show them how it's constructed and what we want to build. And that's the job we're just finishing at the moment. So as you can see, all the straight lines of the house are just broken a little bit by using the wavy lines which we're bringing in, and that will all be just simply covered over with rocks and very simplistic planting. I like the idea of putting a deck over the top of a pond. It always sort of feels quite nice. Obviously, that's just another 3D sketch from what it would look like from inside the house, so eventually. I think I used to do all these drawings by hand when I first started out 30-odd years ago, and I'm just so grateful that we have computers now. They're not quite as nice as a hand-drawn sketch, but there's a lot more flexibility, so you can actually modify the design in the process rather than do a nice drawing and have to stick to the drawing because you don't want to do another drawing sort of thing. So the flexibility of the computer design is good. I probably put too many of these in, sorry. So that's what this project is eventually going to look like. bear in mind that your plumbing and all those sort of details, the boring things about water circulation, they all have to be really well thought out. Where your overflows go, drainage, like ponds invariably leak. I don't think I've ever designed a pond that doesn't have some form of water problem. So you always make sure that there's plenty of good drainage. It's a hairy photo, but I put this one in. This is a large one we did in Lake Ukirika quite a few years ago, just to show you how the concrete structure is tanked and waterproofed. So this is a lot different than a liner system. This is a concrete construction with a tanked system, and that's really what it should look like in the end. Into the side of a hill, it must look like it was always there. Obviously, it's very hard to see that concrete structure there now. So I think that's it. Another shot. Time is your friend with these systems. Natural water features, obviously. Half of this vegetation turned up, which is just the way I like it. So as your stuff that you put in dies away, you'll find nature just brings in. Woo, go nature. So I think that's it. Thank you very much.
For those of you who are visitors tonight, you know, Garden Design Society sometimes does trips, and people like Bill often is able to get his clients to let us see those gardens. So thank you so much, Bill. And many of us have had the privilege to study under the thoughtful and careful guidance of Penny Clifton. So she's been here from the beginning, promoting the society, Garden Design Society, and she's passionately interested in the trees around Auckland. So more about trees, please, Penny. And just in case anyone's interested that you need to know, if you go to get accredited, this Penny is one of the beautiful people on the panel, and she'll be looking at your work for accreditation, so kind of makes it a bit more special. Thank you, Penny.
Thanks, Glenys. Tēnā koutou katoa. A bit about where I'm from. Ko Mapuia te monga, ko te whanganui a Tara te moana, no Motu Kairangi aho, ko Clifton toko ingoa whānau, ko Penny toko ingoa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. At last year's Pechakucha, I reflected on the role of trees in my lockdown experience. I showed images of lots of trees in my area, including some from the Unitec campus, which were under threat from development, still are. Glenys suggested that tonight I give you a bit of an update on a few key tree issues that are happening in Auckland at the moment. Firstly, Unitec. The development planning there is going at a snail's pace. I've got a watching brief on this process and a contact within HUD, the Housing and Urban Development people, and the Tree Council will be invited to peer review a revised arborist report and recommendations coming up. More recently, one of the chaplains at Unitec contacted me to say that the spirituality group on campus had become aware that the memorial tree area near the suffrage garden on the campus was proposed to be added to the land package to be purchased by the Crown. He has been a celebrant for a number of the memorial tree plantings for staff and students who've died. This is the area, this is one of the memorials. So I've assisted him with making a list of the more than 20 memorial trees, such as this one commemorating Sarah Jane Sadler, a social practice student who died in 2009. We're mapping them in order to prepare a submission opposing the proposed sale of that particular piece of land for obvious reasons. Here's the list with all the people and the dates and the tree names. Moving on to the wider issues of tree loss and tree protection in Auckland, most of you will be aware that since the RMA was amended in 2012, there have been no general tree protection rules in Auckland. Every 3 to 4 years, Auckland Council pays a specialist company to take aerial LiDAR remote sensing images, which are evaluated to monitor tree canopy changes. The last LiDAR analysis, comparing images of the urban forest canopy in 2 years, 2013 and 2016, they're a bit behind, was belatedly presented to Council, and I thought you'd be interested to know about the analysis and some of the statistics. This is an example of the LiDAR imaging that they do. The total canopy cover of the combined local board areas is relatively stable, new plantings balancing removals. But the devil is in the detail, and it's a more complex and concerning picture that can be seen if you look a bit deeper. The proportion of small trees less than 10 metres has increased by 11% between those 2 years, and now then comprise 75% of the forest canopy. 17% of the trees were taller than 10 metres, and only 6 taller than 20 metres. No more than 1% of any local board studied had trees taller than 30 metres. So our urban forest is getting shorter in stature, and we're losing the larger trees. Even the 2,904 notable trees on the unitary plan schedule aren't safe. Commissioners have recently been prepared to consent the removal of scheduled notable trees despite their protected status. So when a property such as 52 to 58 Canal Road in Avondale goes up for sale, there's a heck of a lot at stake. This was a diverse collection of mostly native trees, some quite rare, planted by a local teacher on 4 sections, a large family property. Some of you will be aware of the large campaign that took place to try and save these trees. Here are Phil Oster, one of our members, Ewan Cameron and others talking about the values of these trees, their environmental services and role as a biodiversity hotspot for the neighbourhood. Think oxygen production, water absorption, bird and animal habitat, carbon sink. The family wanted to know how they could protect the trees in the sale, but there was only bad news. Locals and mana whenua rallied to occupy the site to stop tree removal. But despite appeals to uphold the urban ngāhere strategy, prolonged discussion and various proposals, Auckland Council did nothing to reserve the land for public good, despite Avondale having a low percentage of tree canopy cover of only 18%, compared to the Council stated goal in the ngāhere strategy of 30% tree canopy cover for all suburbs. So the new owner has no restriction on removing all the beautiful native trees to build blocks of apartments. But now there's the rub. Housing's important too. So I think the way that land is valued for housing and any other use needs to account for the environmental services that the existing vegetation on the site provides for the city. We must develop ways to take account of the effects of our human activities on the environment, which has led to the climate emergency we now face. It's quite an important time right now to have a say. Just in the last week, a new piece of draft legislation has been released to replace the RMA. It's called the Natural and Built Environments Act, NBA, and it will be presented at Parliament and referred to a select committee for consultation, which means that we all have a chance to make submissions. It's a chance to make an input into this process of new legislation that's been designed. The Tree Council and the New Zealand Arborists have formed an action group to lobby for the need for protection of urban trees to be recognised and addressed in this legislation. They've called it Stop the Chop, and they've mounted a media campaign this week to firstly encourage people to use their template to make a submission on the new legislation. It has to be in by the 4th of August. Dr Mel's Barton from the Tree Council spoke on the AM show yesterday, and there will be a full page of tree obituaries in the Herald later this week. The final event will be a public tree funeral procession next Saturday. So the next slide gives the details of the tree funeral being planned. It begins at noon on the corner of Great North Road and Ash Street, where a large scheduled macrocarpa was felled for a block of Ockham apartments recently. The procession will then progress along to the Canal Road site. So I'd like to invite you to make a submission and to join me at the funeral procession if you'd like to. Ngā mihi nui.
I'm sorry, Alex, you have to follow that. Yeah, well, it's all... Alex, where are you? On the Olympic front, Alex, I wonder if Hayden Wild will need a garden one day. Because, you know, you do gardens for elite, you know, but it's confidential, of course. Yeah. So come on, Alex, thank you.
Oh, great, it's never too late. Yeah, my name is Alex McClue and I'm a landscape designer and run a small firm practice. And yeah, I've always, you know how we have many projects that we work with clients, but I'm always on the lookout for something interesting and a way to serve the community and just give my design expertise. And one such project was St. Paul's on Simon Street. Recent restoration work on the church's facade had left the gardens looking rather trampled. What about the gardens, I asked. Alex, do you have time? No, I said. But I can't miss this opportunity, so count me in. And so it's a very unique opportunity to look at a building like this and look at the landscape around it. At first appearance, the surrounding property, it seems very insignificant. In fact, most people don't realise that there's a garden even there. And I don't blame them. The site is literally dropping away to Grafton Gully. And in fact, the street level has arisen over time so much that the front steps you can see behind the fence are now covered by Simon Street and by the footpath. But St. Paul's was a very dominant landmark in Auckland. The first building, built in 1841 in Emily Place, was the light on the hill and one of the most visited sites in the area. The original landscape, of course, surrounding it was a very far cry from the concrete jungle the church now sits in today. So for a long time, the gardens have been very neglected and actually a grave site for many parts of the building that have fallen over time. And so many of these parts of the building they've actually discovered in the garden, such as this apex stone, which has been restored, and we found it in the garden covered in ivy. And so as the projects have continued and many working bees, all these discoveries have been made. And so work began on the first stage of the garden restoration on the street front. And as we started working, I started to realise the significance of our little but timely contribution to the history of the St. Paul's site. The ground's so hard, someone cried. Yes, but this is no ordinary ground that you are digging. And so the morale-boosting speech began. This is no ordinary ground. This is ground turned over by a long line of church founders, builders, heritage enthusiasts, and who could forget the well-intended church garden volunteers? 180 years of history, in fact. So I dug into the church archives, and I discovered that there had been, in fact, a grand plan for a biblical garden designed by Californian-born landscape architect Earl Trittenbach. He set out to make a unique and meaningful garden that would attract visitors from all spectrums of society. Built in 1977, there were high aspirations and was termed as a tourist attraction where you could meet 50 different plants mentioned in the Bible. This even included a cedar of Lebanon, a sycamore tree, the papyrus plant of Moses, and apparently even the forbidden fruit itself, the apricot. This is the landscape architect himself. This is an article in the New Zealand Herald. So looking over the design, I realised that they actually made great use of the steep site, because when I first looked at it, I thought, what am I going to do? The giant stone retaining walls were utilised to create a sheltered microclimate, just like being in Jerusalem itself. Edible planting and a vegetable garden was included. And inside the church was a walk-through display with a full list of plants used and the biblical references. As we continued to work, more evidence from this garden and other renovation efforts were uncovered. The strata of past plant fashions, camellia stumps, bottlebrush branches, and the fragments of old garden tools. Wow, I feel like an archaeologist, someone said. You are. In fact, you're one of the select few to ever work this ground. Of course, there were many more recent reminders of the present city life, as we cleaned up the site, including bedding from the homeless, beer bottles, and fast food leftovers. Some of you who lived in the 1970s are probably recognising some of the fashion statements. Landscaping was certainly different back then, and there's a photo of them lifting those heavy stones, which are still there in the garden. They haven't moved at all. And I said, those are definitely staying. I've hit another stump, someone shouted. Oh, that stump. That's not just any stump. That's very significant. In fact, it's what remains of an old pechakucha tree planted in the 1980s, declaring the parish as nuclear-free. Perhaps not the wisest location to plant a pechakucha, as noted by the heritage architect. So considering this rich history, what can I do to add to it? Well, not much really, and I don't need to. The site is enough, the layers of gardens built over time, and the culture and the people that created them. Continuing the story of the site is what makes the project significant, not the way it looks or how amazing the design is. The most recent planting had a very colonial theme, so here was an opportunity to reflect more of the church's partnership with the local iwi through the presentation of the gardens. So in the first stage of planting, the new street front uses indigenous species to reconnect to the church's identity as part of Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei. So this is part of the garden, and so yeah, and I think what I took away from this is in a modern design culture where we're creating new gardens all the time, and our clients, out with the old and in with the new. This project reminded me of the value of understanding a site's history and the stories of the past. I realised a new design is only a continuation of an ever-evolving story which ought to be celebrated. This project was actually one of the smallest designs I've ever done, yet somehow it feels the most significant, because of the experience of adding another layer to the history that has shaped this treasured site. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex. Another very obedient person, because I did ask him to do that one. Now, Penny spoke to us, and she's our academic person on the accreditation panel. And now this is Jill, who's the chair of our panel, and she's our practicing designer. So if you go for accreditation, she is also on that panel. Thank you, Jill.
E te whānau, ko manga tautari te maunga, ko Waikato te awa, ko te moana nui a kiwa te moana, ko Eastern Empire, ko Wanganui, ko Greyhound rātou, ko Euphemus ngā waka in the 1800s, mai Great Britain ki Aotearoa, no Marangi Bay, ahau, kei Pukekohe ahau e noho ana, ko John Takutane, ko toru ngā tamariki, ko rua ngā mokupuna, ko Jill Taku Ingoa. And Get Outside is my little business. Melissa works with me, who's been the secretary of this wonderful association. And we make messes for kids to enjoy. So I decided to talk to you about some of our little humble projects tonight. I've chosen 3 of our recent projects. And these 3, all of them I was asked to do a revamp. And This is our bread and butter mahi, doing little early childhood projects, but it's actually something that I feel very passionate about. I believe it's really important for children to experience and explore stimulating and challenging, nature-rich, wonder-filled play environments in which children are in charge of their own play and learning. And we're going to pause right here. How many play centre mums are there in the room? Yes, yes. So you understand the importance of this, mahi. And because we're passionate about it, I have joined this organisation called the International Play Association. And this is a movement of which Play Centre was born. And it's a worldwide membership of about 1,000. Now, can we just pause? And I just want to show the little video. I'm going to be really cheeky because I am the chair and I can do things like that. And just show you a 2.5-minute little extra video because it will give the context for what I'm about to present to you. So, is that possible to do? This is our International Play Association video about play. If not, it's on YouTube and you can go and look it up. Oh, there it is.
No mai, haere mai. Welcome. I feel so lucky to live in Aotearoa. There are heaps of places to play. Places to be adventurous and brave. To laugh and waiata. To create and play games to share with friends. To make an imaginary space of my own. There is time to have a go. To try something new. To learn. Sometimes I invite my whānau and friends to join in too. When it's hot, I might go to the awa or explore the tai. Our backyard is fun because I can discover all of the trees and make up stuff. There is always somewhere to go and play. Tamariki and rangatahi are so lucky because in Aotearoa we support Article 31. Article 31 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child says that all children have the right to play. Article 31 is ratified by New Zealand law and means that tamariki like me are guaranteed opportunities to play in our own space, in our own time, and in our own way. It means that we get to play the way we want to play, with no particular outcome in mind. We are in charge of our own play. Play is important because it enables us to expand our world and our imagination. Play is good for our well-being and our learning. Play grows healthy bodies, minds, and hearts. It empowers, nourishes, and heals us. Article 31 protects our right to play and enables us to develop and grow our way. Nau mai haere mai te rōpū tākoro. Te whakatuara I te tākoro o ngā tamariki. Welcome to the International Play Association and Play Aotearoa. We promote the rights of all children to play in their own way. Protect, preserve, promote. Ka kite.
Cool. Yeah, so that's what we do. And what I do as part of that, as well as being involved in this organisation, is I create spaces. Because the sad truth is that very many of our children spend far too much of their time in early childhood centres because both parents have got to work, and these centres often don't have a great deal of resources because they are community-run centres. And often the teachers have the desire to make a really stimulating, exciting place for the children, but they don't have the wherewithal. So they come to us and ask us for some inspiration. And fortunately, people more and more understand that there is a design process involved, and they do have to find some funding for that. So that's good. We used to do all of this stuff for free, but now we do still have to explain the process, as we all do as designers. But people see the value in it now of having a vision for what they're doing, and then they can gather the resources from their community. And often the things that are needed to actually make these playgrounds aren't that expensive, but having that plan that everyone agrees on becomes a really important thing for them. So this is part of what we do. Yeah, so it's not doing the 26. Yes, it is. Right. Okay, now we're away. So this is often what we start with. And always there's a sand pit, and then there's some bark or wood chip, and then there's usually a few bits of play structure. If you're lucky, there's some shade and maybe a shed. But often these centres, that's what we get to start with. But there's this desire to do something better and to have something more natural and inspiring for the children. So that's where we come along, and our job is to mess it up. So we add adventure and we add interest, but it doesn't have to be fancy or expensive. We use natural logs, water, rocks, and of course plants. And we think about space and flow and proportion and detail. And we try to remove the straight lines to extend the lines of the space and soften it and create little journeys for the tamariki. And we add in as many different textures as we can without making it feel too busy. We try to introduce uneven surfaces and use natural elements so that these children who don't often have the opportunity to go and play in the awa or in the moana, like we did, maybe, or in the bush, can have these experiences at the early childhood centre. So we take a log and our contractors will carve it out, and we might gather the water off the roof and put it in a water tank, and then they can play with that water, and they can have these muddy, messy play experiences right there in Green Lane at the back of the hospital in the middle of Auckland, which is great. So yeah, we make ways for children to engage with nature. We capture water, we channel it, we fix logs so that they're secure, we attach ropes to them so that they wobble. Here's another example of one that they came to us and said, we have too much concrete, what can we do? So yeah, so again, we came up with a plan to bring in these natural things so that children can engage with nature and reconnect with their whenua and also with their tangata. So we try wherever possible to find out the stories of the local people and incorporate those into our designs as well. So this is the grand plan for one. We've just done stage 1 of this one at the moment. Loving care kindergarten. So I always try and look for what is there already that's really good. So they had some fijoa trees that we can use as a starting point. And then we just bring in all the nature. So we covered a lot of the concrete with a deck and built a sand area that had 2 different levels with the logs going around and twisting and turning, and the thatched roofs to make it more natural and appealing for the children. And that was the grand opening day. They were terribly excited to get into it. Yeah, so just simple elements, but it's the way that we organise them so that they're presented to children as a journey, or as little separate rooms with little links between them, and try and make things uneven so that there's a bit of challenge there, and bring in height wherever we can as well. Yeah, so that's the sort of thing that we do. Old pumps. And the other thing is, once we've got the plan, we can have a list of all the items that are needed to make this play space, so that then they can go to their local community and say, hey, have you got any big old logs that we can use, or have you got boulders or whatever? So here's another example of a disaster of a space that we were asked to come and help with. This one was particularly challenging because of all the levels and the horrible existing structure, so we basically cleaned it out. But we saw that beautiful group of trees over there at the top, and said, how come the children aren't playing in those trees? It's so hot in this playground. It just catches the sun and it stays there. So they said, oh yeah, do you think we could, it's very steep. And I was like, that's good. Steep is good. So we were able to sort of completely deconstruct this one, and you'll see that we made it into something quite special, I think. That was the sketch drawing. I still like to do things by hand, but as Bill said, it's so much easier on computer. That's a site plan. This is the clump of trees that they weren't allowed to go in, and that was the idea for what we could do instead, with little journeys and making little places for them to sort of go and discover, tucked in amongst the trees there. And that's just the technical stuff, so you can see the process that we go through with planting plan, and some simple elevations to show how the different levels are going to work with each other. Some construction details where they're necessary, and yeah, always a planting plan. And we do CAD it up so that we can easily make changes to the drawings, because it's always an evolving process. And then that's what we ended up with there. So those trees were brought into the play space. We did take some of them out as well, actually, because they were Eugenias, and they were cluttering the space. So we've planted some other more suitable trees in amongst there, but we've used that space that was just covered in trees before as play space now, and built the rocks going up the hill, and a ridiculously steep slide, but just always try and make things so they just comply with the standards. So it's not allowed to be steeper than that, but it is allowed to be that steep. And instead of that hideous little whare, we built some cute little ones and covered it with that wonderful thatch from brussticks. And they climb all over those rocks, and it's quite challenging for them. There's a pump so they can run water down into the sand area as well. And it's cooler, much cooler now that we've opened it up and brought in a whole lot more shaded spaces like that. So that was the view you saw before looking through the old structure. This is what it's like now. So yeah, it's fun. I like my job.
Thank you so much, Jill. Now, our last presenter is Xanthi White. She's our president at present. Xanthi, did you notice I've said accreditation 10 times so far? Yep. And Xanthi's office, promoted the accreditation process with her staff, and that was really good. So if anybody is interested in this process, you can talk to Penny or Jill or Ian, because we want to promote it. Yeah, and so last but definitely not least is Xanthi. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou, I'm Xanthi, as said. And yeah, I'm just going to kind of lift the cap off my kind of studio process. It's a collaborative studio. This is Tom Stewart Smith, famous designer, does these like massive long gardens. When I met him, I discovered that he was incredibly tall, and like I come up to maybe his second button here, and he put this picture on his Instagram recently, and I was just like, perspective, it affects the way we work. I always used to think I had to stand on chairs, and it really gave me great pleasure at this point in my career to see him shrink. And this is a project that we're working on where I was trying to look at, we had 12 hours to pull this project together. It was designed at midnight and then drawn up before midday the next day to be sent to China for construction. But we were trying to expand to see if we could get 6 metres from ground without actually building anything, without actually pouring any concrete or anything. So just compiling earth, rock and substance, so just reorganisation of space. And so it's all about recompiling the perspective of elements that exist and reordering them to create something which equates to something that then becomes something permanent, so that essentially we're not kind of massively impeding on the structure or changing anything, we're just reorganising the world and hopefully reorganising it in a way that's kind of explorative and beautiful. And yeah, looks like the stone fell there rather than it was placed there. Perspective, because in this is an old project at my old school, Barradine, which Natasha was involved in working on as well. And I think what I love about looking at those other images is that idea of structures and layer and movement and systems, and then it comes down to something really small, and these same patterns kind of repeat through, and looking at different connections and work. And then this project is one that was being built in New Zealand at the same time as the other one that was being built in China, and it's like looking at how these systems of rocks and our processes are kind of changing and evolving and working in different places in different ways and appearing in different patterns in our work. And this is about the perspective of like landscape smashing through a building and pulling and making these kind of huge architectural elements, kind of trying to weave our way into them and to kind of giving a sense that the landscape was there before the building, and that, perspective, landscape. This is about, this is a project we worked on, this is about our role as designers and holding the perspectives of others and designing in a way that makes space for other people's ideas, so using our pen and our pencils and our thinking to actually express the fact that sometimes what we're designing is about areas where other people will occupy and develop them and evolve them through time, and that we can activate the use of land by using our creativity so that other people evolve it into kind of magnificent things that will change like your church changed over time and will become all these sort of infinite different things, as opposed to having to be designers which imprint our own patterns on the landscape. This is kind of perspective. This is me, my drawing style. It's crude, it's twink, it's ink, and it's a line. Every line takes a very long time of ink and twink, moving back and forth and smudging and relining and drawing. And twink and ink is the heart of my creative practice, and that's my perspective on lines and shapes. I do try to use computers. They just get equally chaotic, and I would love to go back over that with ink and twink and sort out the lines and the shapes and but moving between different mediums. I love computers, but I also love the hand and I love the simple, and I think you should be able to do this and make it into something magnificent. This is about perspectives of identity. Is identity about what we print on it or the way we approach it? This is a garden in France where the areas in the middle were about sustaining, taking our perspective and practice to sustain what was there, as well as kind of bringing koha of kind of keti, of kind of shapes where we put our gifts and so our perspective is about the way we work and the ideology which we bring to our work rather than just what we print on it. The imprint was led by our philosophy and our practice in this collaboration with Uru Whakaaro. This is about like a really crude sketch, which is now a beautiful garden, but it just like this attachment to arrangement of space where like, why does the lawn always have to touch the deck? We made the lawn touch the deck, and then we looked at it and we're like, what a limiting space this is. It's just one space, and so we just put some planting in the front, and suddenly we had two spaces. We had a lawn and a deck, and we had discovery, and just putting a little bit of garden in between that lawn and deck suddenly turned everything around and turned it from a very pretty nice garden into these kind of a place of discovery and kind of shifting perspective by simple gestures. And to the fact that you don't even know that lawn's there, and yet it's only not even that far apart from it. So just the turning around and the remixing and the transformation of our ideas and shifting perspective on the things that we try and see and think about all the time. This is a lovely drawing that Natasha did from a crude Play-Doh model that I made out of flour and water in lockdown. It's a project called Metamorphosis. Once again, perspective, whether the garden and the form and how those things will together, looking at form rising out. There's a lot of ideas swirling into this thing. This is it, under construction. I have no idea. As this thing was being built and they kept coming back to me with problems and me just kind of fizzing my way through them, I was like, is this what it's like being a dude? They just do what I tell them. They're just like, I'm like, no, just keep going, it'll work. And they just did it and they built it. And then this is the perspective of that structure, which is so dominating and complex. And then when it's nestled into the earth and rests in the earth, the reason it works is because it's designed with an understanding of earth and contour and the balance between the two and the energy between those things and keeping those things in check. And so and then perspective is the last one, just trying to chuck as much in as possible. This one is just about light, because light is essentially one of the things that, how light goes through plants, how light goes through gardens, how light goes through glass and diffuses everything, changes our perspective constantly, and awareness of light is essential to perspective. There's a theme.
Well, some clever people could put something sensible together to thank everybody, but I think we mainly all together just say, wow, we're in a room with these amazing creative people. Thank you so much to every single one of the presenters. And we've got you a lovely beeswax candle, so I'll give those to you later, I think. So now please join us for tea and coffee. And there's a ginger slice and a chocolate brownie. They're both gluten-free. So this is the time you can talk to the presenters and,
Final karakia since we started with it. Sure. I should have a karakia kai, really, but let's just... e tu for karakia whakamutunga. Kia ino i tātou. Kia tau iho kia tātou katoa, te rangimāri e, te manaakitanga me te aroha. Tuturu whakamaua, kia tīna, haumi e, hui e, tāiki e.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, welcome.